What's going on? Slip is here with match 2 of our Esper Brain Control. Incidentally, I realized I forgot to talk about sideboarding in the last match. It was pretty simple. I took out our main deck, Blessed Alliance. I brought in a Celestial Purge, so we had more answers to Lily. That's it. For match 2, we're on the draw again. We see this hand, which if we're playing against some kind of like creature-based combo-ish deck, Path is going to help us. But we have a couple Think Twices to help us scale up to Cryptic and Snap Cryptic or Snap Path. I decided to keep this. It's pretty dicey. And we see Urza's Power Plant and Dross Supreme Verdict. So this is a nightmare for us if we're playing against Tron, against a green-based Tron deck, right? We're really hoping it's banned Eldrazi here because we kept a hand that's good against creatures, and these cards are not going to help us against Tron, really. We're not going to get to Cryptic fast enough. But we see an Eldrazi Temple. That's good. Opponent plays Matter Reshaper, which we're going to more or less ignore for the moment. And what we really want to do here is dodge Thought-Knot Seer, not because we mind pathing it, but because we want to think twice. We need to hit a land drop. Opponent plays Basilisk Caller, does nothing against us, which is good. We think twice and draw push, and fortunately we do draw a land, which is nice. I could have played that untapped, but I decide probably, if our opponent didn't play Thought-Knot Seer that turn, we're probably not going to path anything here. So our opponent is indeed playing Reality Smasher, not Thought-Knot Seer. So that is not bad for us in a certain sense. We have a verdict, but we have a difficult decision. We can think twice this turn to try to hit a fourth land and then verdict both of these away. Or we can path this and not take 5. At 16 life, like going to 8, it's a little rough. I think in the end, I would prefer to go to 8 here and just think twice and try to hit that fourth one. So we do hit it. In fact, we hit 2, which is excellent. We're just going to verdict. Hope our opponent doesn't hit another Reshaper off of Reshaper. It's an Expedition map. Isn't doing a ton. Cracks it. Plays a Thought-Knot Seer, which doesn't leave them a lot of great options, but I'm very surprised they took push there. We have no way to turn push on. It's possible that our opponent's holding Ulamog and actually wants us to path the Seer. That would be a little strange. That being said, we're not going to Blessed Alliance. We're going to give them a land because we want to hold up Cryptic for whatever their second play is here after the attack. So we path this. Blessed Alliance also generally better against Reality Smasher because it doesn't 2-for-1 us. We draw a land. We're fine with that. And we get to flashback a Think Twice since our opponent does nothing. We're kind of feeling as if our opponent's holding the like Spatial Contortion Warping Whale business because they're not doing anything. If they had an Ulamog, they could play it, and that would probably be worth doing just to hit some of our lands. But we'll just keep drawing cards. We hit 2 jars. At this point, I think there's a chance that our opponent's trying to overload our counters since we have Cryptics. So I decide not to play a jar and hold up both Cryptic and Logic Knot. Obviously, we want a Cryptic first because Logic Knot's going to be really tough to get through. But if we Cryptic first, we'll be able to Logic Knot basically anything. Our opponent plays Batterskull, which is an instant counter. That card's a blowout against us, and it's one of the main things we want to be able to handle on the stack in this matchup. I decide, since our opponent didn't play a second thing there, I decide they're probably actually not trying to entrap us or something. Plus we have a path that we can actually use while still crypticking. So I'm going to take up Jar, I'm going to flashback Think Twice, we get an Esper Charm, discard Brain in a Jar. We could think about Esper Charming our opponent here, we have Snapcaster Mage, but instead I'm going to Cryptic this, and we hope our opponent plays something else. And the reason is, Walking Ballista we definitely counter. Instead of pathing, right, we don't want to give a 3. The reason is that our opponent going to 3 cards is going to let us Esper Charm snap Esper Charm next turn. And I've said in other places that you probably haven't seen, But I think people maybe don't manipulate Jar enough, and this is an instance where I think taking up Jar is actually a good thing. Obviously, we have a second one, so the decision's easier. Like if we draw Beck, it's not really a mana-intensive problem to play it in the turn after next. But I think being able to Esper Charm, snap Esper Charm for less mana is a good thing here, and we eventually want to scry. So we get to play Brain in a Jar specifically because our Esper Charm costs 2 mana less. Opponent discards probably a land and spatial contortion, yeah. So we were right in our feeling that he was holding the 2 mana plays. Esper Charm again. Opponent Warping Wails the Snapcaster. And at this point, we kind of need to start attacking with Colonnade because we don't have anything else to do. We're just hoping our opponent plays creatures. Doesn't play anything. So we can't tick down this jar and tick up this jar. So since we're running low on 3 mana plays, we have 2 Sroms, 1 Cryptic, and 1 Verdict left in the deck. I decided I'm just going to take this up to 4 to maximize the scry value next turn. But we draw back anyway. I'm going to go ahead and Verdict. I'm going to go ahead and Colonnade. And our opponent taps a lot of mana, taps 10 mana, so we're expecting Ulamog, in which case we bet call in response, float white, and path it. But he plays Walking Ballista for 5. So we can basically, alright, so if Walking Ballista lands, path is not going to keep it from killing us. Our opponent can also add a counter to Walking Ballista, so we have to keep that in mind when it comes to Blessed Alliance. Because he can add a counter to it in response to Blessed Alliance, that means we need to gain 4 life before this hits the deck. Now, that means that what we want to do is let it land, like Blessed Alliance now, let it land, path it. And I decide to bet call first to draw an extra card, since we're swinging with Colonnades, but I think this is actually a mistake. The reason this is a mistake is that when our opponent sees that he can't kill us, because we've Blessed Alliance before Ballista resolves, he's going to ping probably the birds, and that's going to take away a 2-turn clock we otherwise would have had. What's really a 1-turn clock in the sense that our opponent has 1 draw step now, since this is on his turn. So this was definitely a mistake. However, we don't get punished because we drew Logic Knot. I'm going to go ahead and counter this. Instant counter. And we're going to take up our jar that's on 4 because that lets us play bet call next turn if for some reason we needed to. Fire up Colonnade. Swing for 8. We have a jar on 2, which means we get to 1 mana Esper Charm on draw step, and then we get to get 4 more 1/1s and beat our opponent to -8. And they scoop it up. What's going on? Slip is here. Back to match 2. I had a little error there recording match 2, so I'm doing another split here. For sideboarding, we took out 2 push because I'm not super enthusiastic about it, and we brought in the 2 Ruined Halos for those, because Ruined Halo is pretty good in this matchup. And we took out the Snare, Pierce package on the draw for the Blessed Alliance, and I tried 2 Surgicals here. On the play, if we played a game 3, we would probably consider at least bringing in a Spell Snare or 2 for Chalice, and it's worth noting that it hits Ratchet Bomb, which an opponent can sometimes bring in against us because we play Bex, and then that gives them this kind of incidental out to Ruined Halo that might otherwise be problematic for them. For the moment, though, we're trying a little Graveyard Hate just to try to thin out their threat base. And we see this hand on the draw. It's not particularly good, but because Eldrazi Tron's a little slow, we're going to keep it. Logic Knot should be okay. Opponent does nothing. If they drop Tron here, our Logic Knot is actually not going to be okay, but they don't. They play a Matter Reshaper that we're going to just ignore. We draw an Esper Charm, which is good. Our opponent somehow does nothing here. Whatever. We can draw 2. We could make them discard 2, but given the amount of chaff in their deck, I don't really like Esper Charming them once from 5 cards. I don't think it's worth it. So we draw Strom's Expertise and Ruined Halo. The fact that our opponent played Cavern into nothing indicates that they're working up to a 5-drop, probably. Otherwise, they wouldn't have kept this hand on you know, just having like Cavern and Matter Reshaper, it wouldn't make any sense. So we could Ruined Halo Reality Smasher and try to hard read their 5-drop, but the other 5-drop they could be working towards is Batterskull. And if we don't counter that, we are pretty fucked. So I just had to play Ghost Quarter here. I'm going to Ghost Quarter the Cavern on their draw step, just in case they have a waste in hand and draw the second one. And they Surgical Esper Charm, which kind of gives us a decision, right? We could Esper Charm here. Since we're at 8 cards, this isn't really card disadvantage. We would have had to discard a lower quality card, granted, but I would much rather counter whatever they're doing than just draw 2 or make them discard to 2 cards and keep their 2 best ones here. So we'll just let them do that. That's fine. And I'm happy to have them thin out their threat base by playing cards like Surgical. One has a feeling that this sideboard plan might not work out very well for them. So we Ghost Quarter there, and our opponent plays something. If it's a Smasher, we'll probably counter it even though we have Ruined Halo, but it's a Batterskull, which is an instant counter. And our opponent's Surgical's Logic Knot, even though they know we only had 1 in hand, it actually leaves it in our graveyard. I'm a little confused. A little confused about it. Maybe they meant a Surgical Ghost Quarter? Is that possible? I mean, I don't know how many they think we could play as a 3-color Cryptic deck, but at the same time, we draw a Beck Call here. We could hold up Cryptic, or we could Stroms into Beck Call. The thing is, if we hold up Cryptic, our opponent's still getting in for 3 and can choose to do nothing and then Warping Whale our Stroms. So we're just going to go ahead and get 4 7 1/1s and draw 4 cards. Our opponent's Surgical's Beck Call, which means they really don't have a lot of stuff in hand, and that's actually fine with me since we actually got to use it. It's an interesting sideboard strategy, but I probably wouldn't have kept this hand. Our opponent plays Reality Smasher. Now we do have a decision. So we can basically wipe their board. Like, we can trade all of our tokens for everything on their board, and they get a second card off of Matter Reshaper. We could take 8 and hold up and like swing for 7 and then Cryptic next turn and try to swing for 7 with the Colonnade again. That's a reasonable play. Or we could chump or trade with the Reshaper and Ruined Halo the Reality Smasher next turn while chumping with servos. So I decide, although the Cryptic play might actually be better, I decide I'm just going to trade for this Reshaper, at which point they always get another Reshaper. So never make that play, right? No, 100% to get another Reshaper. I'm going to Ruined Halo here on Reality Smasher. And swing for 4. Or 3. Just in case something weird happens. I think I left a second token up. I guess it wouldn't have changed our clock, right? They go to 10 now. So chump. Don't want them to draw any more cards. We don't have Cryptic up. Our opponent plays Thought Knots here and can take either basically Cryptic, Blessed Alliance, Ruined Halo, Supreme Verdict. I mean, they have a lot of things that they can take, and they take Verdict, which is like generally a good card against them, and they're Hellbent and would draw us a card, but they have a Ghost Quarter for our Colonnade. We have a Ruined Halo in hand and 4 flyers, and a Blessed Alliance and a Cryptic. I just think they're pretty unlikely to win, honestly, if they take the Verdict. Like, we don't have any Becks left, so our threats are kind of gonna be absent for the rest of this game. We want to keep our threats around. I definitely would have taken the Ruined Halo there, I think. We're gonna Ruined Halo Thought Knots here. Unless our opponent top decks something really nuts, I don't think we can really lose this. Like, Walking Ballista, kind of annoying. It would have to be Walking Ballista on next turn when we're at 3, right? So he does this so we can't get him to sack the Reshaper, which we wouldn't do anyway. We're going to fetch because our life total isn't super important. We're going to think twice. We're going to swing for 4. And our opponent kind of frustration ghost quartering, realizing we're not tapping out. And so basically what we want to do here is our opponent might hope that we tap down his team with Cryptic to avoid taking the 3 from Matter Reshaper, and then he can do something that can put him back in the game afterwards. But of course, what we're going to do after he attacks with all 3 of these is just gain 4 off Blessed Alliance. Like, he can't beat that, right? And then we can Cryptic whatever he does afterwards. So opponent plays a land anyway, not even trying to get us to misplay. I think he's a little frustrated at this point, but I guess keeping a hand of 3 surgical extractions against Drago is maybe a little bit responsible for that as well. So anyway, a reasonable game there, but we're happy to get a 2-0 against a matchup that's actually pretty tough for us. So that's good. Well done there. See you in match 3.